external audit?
Sure. So we're behind on the audit. We are probably 80–90% of the way there to where we would be last year. We issued the audit in December. I'd say we're about a month behind. The hope is that we could issue by the end of January. Frankly, we just don't have the staff to respond to Bonadeo's requests timely.
Okay, thank you. Now, how many positions do you have open in finance?
It's a moving target, but I believe 8.
8. And now we also have personnel here, human resources. So if you could, I'm just wondering where we are as far as hiring people to aid Mr. O'Connor's the finance department. Have we canvassed the people on the list and everything else, or where do we stand with that?
So I'd have to take a look to see if...
Introduce yourself and all that.
Oh, sorry. Rick Elsevier, Director of Human Resources.
Okay.
So I would... Sorry, I'm not as tall as you. I would have to take a look to see if there were any tests administered recently, but their postings are all up and active. One of our issues is that we're currently working out of strictly Indeed because we don't have an applicant tracking system that we need to cast that wide net that we need. So ultimately what we are looking for is an ATS to help us cast nets to 200 plus job boards, but we're working strictly out of Indeed because of...
So in actuality, we don't have any kind of procedural way of accessing people that are on the list, or how's that work? I mean,
so any
normally you
list?
can't. I mean, I've been around the city a long time. Normally we canvass people who are on the list to see if we can fill these positions.
So in order to canvass, we would have to have a test that was given. So I don't know when the last test was given.
So
it's behind at years at this point.
Don't we hire before we test sometimes? And
We
then
can
expect
provisionally.
to
So
test?
and that's what I'm saying. So the provisional hires, those are being posted for. But in order to canvass, the test would have to have been already given recently.
Okay, so Frank, the administration is aware that we have gaps. We don't have people in finance department. So why can't we hire provisionally?
So we could hire provisionally. Our problem is not, it is absolutely finding candidates. It's not just about civil service testing, that's part of it. It's not just about the posting and the tracking systems, that's part of it. But I think, as all of you are aware, this is the single hardest employment market across all disciplines that I've seen in 30 years of being in and around human resources. And
Okay, I agree with you totally on that.
thank you, I appreciate that. And that we may need to write that down. And
Because it would be the first time.
I know,
Right.
and in accounting particularly. So I would direct your attention to article in the Wall Street Journal about a week ago in accounting, specifically hiring in accounting across the country down 17%, 300,000 folks currently working in accounting and finance have walked away from the discipline in the last year. It's an incredibly difficult, as Greg will be able to tell you, an incredibly difficult discipline to hire in right now.
You know, I agree with you on that.
Appreciate that.
I know people, obviously, people are a scarce resource sometimes, but I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we follow every type of procedures to fill these positions.
Without question.
And it doesn't seem like we have, or have we?
I would disagree with that. I would say that we are certainly doing all the things that the city has traditionally done to hire, not enough. So I would agree that it's not enough, but I don't think that we have left any particular stone unturned. We just need to do more.
So,
To the point of other agencies or industries with finance, even with the county, is there what's the attraction between the two? What would make me want to come work for the city versus the county? Like, has all that attraction and everything as far as recruitment has that gone out?
So I'm not sure that the city is, particularly in any area that carries a significant amount of expertise. So that certainly is finance. It's engineering. You heard Dave Proack talk about IT Anything that carries any kind of expertise, very, very difficult to hire right now. The city is not the employer of choice, and there's a variety of reasons for that. I don't want to say that there's a single silver bullet.
But that's that's still speculation. I mean,
Right.
Well, number one would
No,
be wage.
I don't think it's speculation. I think the concern that you are bringing up right now speaks to the fact that there used to be a line outside the door to work for the city in all of these disciplines. That line doesn't exist.
you might be right there, you might not be right. All I'm saying is that we should make every effort in order to fill every position, because obviously with item 12, we're talking about amending this for this particular group, Fust, Charles, and Chambers,
Yep.
in order to go to April. Is that it, April?
That's April, we're asking for
April
the
to finish
extension.
work
Yep.
that we approved the $350,000
Yep.
because, we were told that we needed to build this sort of infrastructure in order to get things done.
That's
So we
correct.
could lateral to Bonadeo
Yep.
about the external audit.
Yep.
So I'm just trying to lay the groundwork here, If we make every effort to fill out all these as many vacancies as we can.
Yep.
I can be satisfied that we're making
So-
making some progress.
Again, I'll agree with you, Counselor.
Wow.
2 for 2?
Yeah, so you can write that one down as well. We're not doing enough. Are we doing everything that we have traditionally done? Yes, and more. I would say that there has been no time in the city's history where we have been more proactive in reaching out for hiring. Is it sufficient? Absolutely not. We're not doing enough. That's part of what Rick is doing, basically rebuilding our recruiting and retention systems from the ground up. It's a holistic approach. There's no one single thing that's going to work, and that's really what Rick's doing. It's not enough, and we're having a lot of operational difficulties because of it.
And of course, the counselors and I, for somebody who's gone through the budget process for years, the sooner we get this information so we can plan for the future because shortly we'll be right in the budget process for next year.
And I would ask you to remember this day because we will be asking you for increases in the budget for human resources to build more proactive systems, for finance to recharge the salary structure. So no question.
Good, excellent. Now, where do we stand with this this outfit as far as information goes? What more information do they have to acquire? And do they have the capacity to acquire that information from you in order to get it to Bonadeo so we can get an external audit here?
Yeah, so much of what FUS is doing is unrelated to the audit. It's related to a financial systems overhaul. So the remaining outstanding items for the audit are really all things that we've got to figure out. A lot of the audit, the information is going to come from institutional knowledge or knowing where to look. It's not really something somebody can step in off the street and figure out. So there's a backlog of those things that one or two or a few people know, and it's just a matter of tracking that information down and getting it back to the auditors.
Okay, I'm a little confused here, but that's not a rare thing for me. So Fuss, Charles, and Chambers, they're not involved so much in preparing the information for the audit?
They have been heavily involved for the last 3 months.
Okay.
In the last couple of weeks, it's largely shifted to a project to ultimately develop an inventory of procedures and functions that we can use to start designing new financial software.
Okay, so they are involved. So where are we? I know that they've already been paid like $1 million. How much have they been paid? They've paid them like $100,000 or whatever. How much?
Yeah, FUST, I think about $150,000.
$150,000. So you're satisfied with what they produced so far? I'm just wondering how.
I think they're
how
doing
much
great
more-
work. We could use another 5 of them. With the contract we have, we can afford 3 of them, and it's great. It would be great. You know, the people that we have are great. Everybody we've worked with is great. You know, if those people came to us 5 years ago and have been staying with us the whole time, it would be even better. But, you know, we've got some turnover with them. You know, they've had to move some people around on the engagement. And so there's some inefficiencies there, having to, you know, bring new people up to speed. But the people that we've been working with are extremely productive and you know, have been helpful in the audit.
So I guess the follow-up on Councilor Hogan's point is if we are lacking staff and they have been great and we have a capacity to maybe bring on more, why aren't we doing them? Why
Bring more from
them?
FUST?
Yeah.
I don't know that they have the capacity. The engagement as it was laid out, you know, was for 3 or 4 people. And, you know, right now in January, it's hard to ask any CPA firm to, you know, give us any additional resources. And, you know, outsourcing these people, it costs a lot more than hiring them internally. So, you know, the cost goes up significantly.
I have a question. What was the pre-pandemic number that you were down, or were you not down staff pre-pandemic?
We were down staff. You know, we're always going to have some vacancies and turnover. You know, I would say in these key functions, you know, CPC's kind of operates on its own. It's unique from the rest of the finance department. So the 20 or so positions in the rest of the finance department, we probably had, you know, a revolving 2 or 3 vacancies, and now it's 7 or 8.
So how far away are we to giving Greg here enough information so we can start? Have you started already? Okay. So it is an ongoing thing right now. Okay. When do you think, how much more do you need, Greg? You know?
Mike?
So, I guess to back up, to the original deadline, you know, internal deadline for the audit was December 31st, kind of set by all of us as a group. To get to that deadline, we would have needed just about everything by October 10th. And we did that last year. So, and we've done this for many years, so we're pretty comfortable in terms of that timeline. So at this point, we started receiving information, you know, from about November 10th through, let's call it December 15th in rough terms. So yeah, Brad said we're behind about a month. I'd say it's probably closer to 6 weeks at this point. So not to get too technical with the audit process at this point, we can do that when we come back and explain it all. But basically, we need to know the numbers in total, right? So we can do the audit planning, we can set up those audit programs, we can do your federal audit. That federal audit is, again, contingent on spending over $750,000. We have to audit what we call the major programs, and we have to have final numbers so that we can determine what those major programs are. So we received that final CFA December 15th. So the audit of the federal funds really hasn't started yet. The audit of the city's financial statement is well underway. I would say, you know, we're in process. We haven't finished any of the areas, but we've touched everything. So it's going. I think a realistic timeline, we had originally, Brad and I had talked about the end of January. I think realistically, we're probably pushing more towards mid-February at this point. Just because the wrap-up of that process on our end, I mean, you've all seen our financial statements, right? I mean, it's an inch thick. So it takes a good solid week once you get to that point to just finish it up. So, and we're not there yet.
And there's continuing discussion back and forth between you and the finance department.
Right.
And I imagine, will you be dealing with FUS too? FUS chambers and?
We haven't dealt with them directly, no.
Okay, so you'd be
We
just
deal
dealing
with
through
Brad's team.
Brad, okay.
Right.
Okay. Well, thank you, Greg. I'm going to go to the city auditor who brought this to our attention. Do you want to say anything, Nader?
So, there's a couple of things. One is when I first became the auditor, prior to that, I had met with the mayor and Frank, and one of the things that I talked about was the inability over the previous 8 years that I was on the council that we could ever get to the December 31st deadline. The importance of that as a counselor is that 6 months after the previous fiscal year closes, you should be able to close out your books and have your audit completed. The school district does it every year. Theirs was completed December 15th, and Greg is saying he's getting the material on December 15th. You as counselors need to have that information as you prepare to look at the budget. This year, when the Commissioner of Finance, when Brad came before the council in September to make the argument for the waiver, or make the proposal for the waiver, not the argument, make the proposal for it, he specifically said that the two items that were going to be included in it was, one, to get the audit done by December 31st. This is not my words, those are his words. In addition to which, they said there was other financial services that they wanted to accomplish, which he had also spoke about today, to amend the budget to extend it to the end of April. The importance of having this audit completed is so that it can have a true reading before you go into budget season, so that you have the completed audit, you have the capital improvement plan, you have the mid-year transfer information, and then on April 8th, the administration has to present to the council by charter a budget proposal. So you have the opportunity from the end of December, if we completed like we did last year, through the first 3 months of the year to get prepared for your budget hearings. So that's the concern that I have, and that's why I raised the issue with you all. And my understanding of it, and I was really pleased to see that Brad and Frank and the mayor made it a commitment last year to get that completed by December 31st. And as President Hudson said, when she talked about the waivers, we knew that we were going to have to do this work. And if we didn't have the staffing to do it, then if we're going to hire outside contractors to do it, that deadline should have been part of the agreement, in my opinion, to get that completed.
Okay. Any questions of the city auditor from the councilors?
Yeah, is that deadline in the city charter? Is
No.
that oh, okay. It's just an agreed upon.
Yes. Again, the significance of it is
Sure.
having it 6 months after the previous fiscal year closes. You don't want to wait 9 months
Right.
until you're into the next year and already looking at the upcoming budget.
Okay. Brad?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that, and just for some context, last year was the first year the city's ever issued their financials in the same calendar year as the fiscal year. It was also the first year we ever had financials issued without material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. Before this administration got here, the financials were consistently issued in February, March, and April.
Also, Frank, maybe, and Brad, you can chime in, the extra $123 million, we were talking about the American Rescue Plan money, that would be included as far as the monies go in this particular audit, right?
Correct.
We would
Yep.
show a revenue in and out as far as the revenue in and out.
Sure, of course.
Revenue in and
Yep.
expenses out.
Absolutely.
And that'd be more, obviously, probably more work.
Yep. There is additional work, does require additional audit, but still, I think that, I don't want to use that in any way as an excuse. The auditor is 100% correct. I'm going to take it a step further. The city does not have the resources. So the auditor's talking about closing once a year. We should be closing our books on an interim basis. We do not have the resources or the systems that allow us to do that. Whose fault that is, how that's come to pass, water under the bridge. We cannot issue any kind of interim statement, which is normal practice for any organization of our size, so that the management team, the auditor, the council, everybody, taxpayers can see where we are on an interim basis. We have never, ever, to my knowledge, Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, you've been doing it longer than I have, we have never closed our books on an interim basis, done any kind of interim close, monthly, quarterly, semi-annually. We close once a year. Massive undertaking. It takes every single resource that finance has to do that once a year close. Our goal is to get to the point where we're doing interim statements, where we're doing interim closes, so that it's not the massive undertaking that it is right now to close once a year.
So that is a goal.
Absolutely, it's a goal.
Terrific.
And Brad will attest to the fact that it is in red on my goal sheet and has been since the day I showed up here.
Because I appreciate your candor on that. I mean, obviously, and I think we have, especially since we dealt with some severe problems during the COVID crisis, and we worked really well together. So I feel that the council would be very receptive to anything you need, especially since the city auditor brought this up, about where our finances are. I am especially nervous about the ARPA money, because I believe, as we talked about this, at some point, the federal government's going to show up with auditors.
I think that's a good guess, personally, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, the sooner we can put this all together.
And again, we'll be doing about, as you and I talked about before the session, probably somewhere around 55% of the ARPA money is out. Probably something less of that was out in the current fiscal year. Some of it has been done in the new fiscal year, the fiscal year that we're talking about. But I couldn't agree with you more. We are absolutely focused on building a system and a framework that allows for total visibility and transparency around our finances, along with sustainability. And we're not there yet. And I'm disappointed we're not there yet, but we're not there yet.
Does the 350 to FUS get us closer to that? Is that what they're working on?
So thank you for that question, because that's the second half of what FUS Charles is working on. So, and Brad mentioned this, we're looking at the entire financial system, what we call the ERP, the Enterprise Resource Programming and Planning. And so we're looking at that ERP, our core system. We refer to it colloquially as PeopleSoft. And love it or hate it, we inherited it. Probably, I think there are multiple numbers of us in this room that would have installed it differently, approached it differently, and maybe even made a different choice for a core system, but it is what it is. We need to rebuild it, and that's part of what FUST is doing. That's the second half of what FUST is doing, is helping us map out the plan. They're doing what we call the discovery to help us map out the plan for what's the next iteration of our core financial system. The PeopleSoft system is not, as presently configured and running, meeting our needs.
Okay. Any other questions? Nader, no, I think Nader wants to take it. Okay, that's number 2 for you, Nader.
I understand, 3 strikes and you're out. Or 1 out of 3 puts you in the Hall of Fame. So I'm not here to be critical of Brad. Brad's department has been very cooperative and helpful. I've mentioned that in writing. I've said that to him. This is about a $300 million operation that, as Frank just said, can't produce on the general ledger, can't provide the information that is required of any business that is $300 million. And this is not, again, I hope it's not a focus about blame. It's about what is the priority that we have as a city that's going to make it so that each year we're able to, at a minimum, have the financial statement completed. Like the school district that's twice our size, and I realize they have staff, but they have turnover too. But we need to make that a priority. I was unsuccessful of it as a counselor, making that argument. Greg's heard me how many times say that, Greg, over the past 10 years. And the mayor was very interested in trying to see us get to this point too. So I'm just concerned that last year we were able to do it. Where did we fall off that we aren't able to get it completed this year, even with hiring an external consultants to assist with it. And to President Hudson's point, we knew this back in July. Why aren't we able to get that completed in a timely fashion on behalf of the taxpayer and you as the counselors who have to make the decisions for all of us?
I agree. Brad?
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of answer that. So simply the reason we can't get it done is we, of the 8 positions, we were missing a director of accounting for several months. We're missing an assistant director of accounting. We're missing an accountant 3, an accountant 1, 2 financial systems people. So these are the people that do the work. So accounting, as a function is kind of broken into 2. You've got what a lot of people think of accounting as, which is bookkeeping, and that's, sending money out the door, collecting money. And that there are a lot of people that are available to do that. They're still hard to find, but there are a lot of people that can, process transactions through the system and do the bookkeeping. What we're missing is the people that do the reconciliations, reviews, financial reporting, kind of higher level accounting. That stuff you can't outsource for. That's the kind of stuff that, the person with the 10 years experience that you want, there's not an accounting firm in central New York that's going to say, yeah, take this. These are the most valuable people in the profession. And so those people aren't available. Those people are available for full-time employment if you're paying the right amount, but it's not something that you can fill the need within a couple of months.
I mean, those people, like Nader mentioned, did we lose all those people over the last year or not? Or
we did. So, the accountant 3, we created the position July 1st, 2021, and we haven't gotten a qualified candidate since then. The other 2 positions we lost.
Okay, so they left.
And a couple of the other positions we created a year and a half ago. Yeah.
What's the average salary of an accountant 3?
65,000 or so.
And with that's a civil service position too, when you create
Right.
it, it's civil service?
Yep.
Have you
Are they all
gotten,
civil service, Brad? All 8?
They are all civil service. Yes, they are all civil service. All civil service, not all union.
have people applied for these jobs? Have you interviewed for them?
The applicants trickle in. The biggest thing we've seen, anyone that's remotely qualified, we'll reach out to, and usually the conversation lasts about 10 seconds when we say there's a residency requirement, and they tell us thanks but no thanks.
So you haven't turned anybody away that's wanted the job that,
I would do anything for a qualified candidate.
So that's the question that I have now. What is a qualified candidate on the city level? What's a qualified candidate?
I mean, we've got a bunch of different positions. The positions with the biggest need, the typical candidate is probably a bachelor's or master's in accounting or finance. Accounting is a very distinct technical skill that doesn't translate well from other adjacent financial professions. So, the accountants we're looking for that could be helpful to us would need good accounting experience. And again, the difference between accounting and bookkeeping, someone who is an accountant for the small company down the road doesn't necessarily translate to what we're trying to accomplish. The higher level positions, ideal candidate probably is bachelor's or master's, CPA, 10 years experience, to get us where we want to be. And I couldn't agree more with what the auditor's saying. And Frank, I want to produce financials. I leave this place saying, we can't do it. We can't produce financials for the city of Syracuse. We can't do it, and nobody knows what's going on. I don't know what's going on, on a day-to-day basis on, timely, accurate financial reporting.
So is that combined with the years of experience and the degree, or is that and or?
Both. In order to get us where we need to be, it's a $350 million organization. We can't staff it with bookkeepers. It's not going to work. You need people that know what they're doing, that are experienced, that have the education, that can figure these things out on their own. And even we've gotten people that look good on paper that just aren't a good fit because the city's unique. The city's hard. It's
So how do we fill that then? Because it seems impossible to me. You're not going to get somebody from a municipality in Buffalo to come work at ours. They're going to be different anyway. So how do you hire fuss to have this?
Frank's going to tell you how we're going to get those people.
There's a magic
circle
there's a
here.
magic answer to it. It is a big circle. There is no magic answer to it. So it's a grind. It's working with Rick and his team to go from being simply a processing of applications to being more proactive in our recruiting. It's looking to change the culture of the city and the perception of the city to be one that is a more a better employer of choice. I want to read you one quote from the end of that Wall Street Journal article. This is from
We love we're all Democrats, we love the Wall Street
I know,
Journal.
absolutely.
One of our favorite things.
If it's not in the Wall Street, it isn't true. Keith Wolf is the managing director of a recruiting firm for accountants. He ends the article by being quoted, "Accounting is a reliable path to stable, steady work, but there are easier ways to enter the business world. There's so many options. Why would someone pursue the much more difficult path?" That's the environment that we're
For the
recruiting in right
challenge.
now.
And you know, municipal finance is a challenge. As you, Frank, you well know that.
Without question, without question.
Listen, Greg, come on, Greg.
I have a
We
question
got
really
in a
quick. But if nothing is adding up to me. Based on the experience you need, based on what we're paying, you're not gonna get
Right.
what you want for these positions. So when people take the civil service test and there's somebody that came from booking or how do we prepare them? Like, is there some way that they could take like the lower county position and we start preparing them? Because how do you get the experience if you don't be in a position? You know, how do we, like, looking at the bigger lens, like we have all these positions open, we're behind, we're down. How do we prepare someone on a lower scale? Because everyone learns from somewhere. You typically just, unless you had the 10-year experience, they're not coming in for 60,000. I know I wouldn't. Like, I got that kind of experience. They know their work. How do you prepare someone that's passing a test that probably could do some of the work to be prepared for the next level if they're not?
That's a great question, Councilor Caldwell, because that's how people started the
Yeah.
departments years ago.
Can I add something?
Sure.
All right, so when, honestly, I shouldn't be up here, but I'm not up here.
You're like your predecessor.
Go, John, go.
Anyway, with what Councilor Caldwell said, Frank and whomever, Brad or whatever, with the civil service, there's a qualification for Count Clerk 3. If you, and there's a screening of those qualifications. If they screen them and say they're qualified to take that test for that position, then that's where I'm confused at, like what Councilor Caldwell is talking about. Why can't they be hired?
Yeah, they absolutely can. There are no city residents who have passed the Accountant 1 or Accountant 3 exam.
What's
So
the
I
passing
think
rate?
I have a
What's-
constituent who applied and was denied.
What's the passing
for an
rate?
accountant position, we've got a lot of positions in
For a
finance.
vacancy in your department.
Yeah, so the accountant positions are the hardest to hire. CPC, again, unique. They've got some other positions that we don't have in the accounting or financial operations department. And I think we have done a really good job of promoting internally. So CPC is a great feeder. InfoAid is actually not civil service, so it's a great foot in the door. Those positions turn over quickly, but it's a great way for somebody to get into the city. We can identify talent quickly for someone who maybe isn't good at passing an exam or hasn't had the opportunity to take an exam, doesn't have the education. So we do have a path for those people to progress. Even in the accounting department, we've identified some really qualified people and have promoted them. We've had a hard time backfilling those positions.
So out of all those positions, no one in the city has passed the test.
So the Accountant 1 and the Accountant 3 position, there are no city residents who, I don't know if there are any on the list. We've reached out to everyone on the list who has passed that's a city resident, and no one was interested in the position.
So nobody was interested. All right, and then also with the scale of how the civil service works, when we say nobody passed, does that mean nobody was reachable of a city resident, or was it that they just didn't pass the test at all? Because I know there's a reachable scale. If you get
Reachable
the
is
top
anyone
10
that
is from
lives in the
90
city,
up
right?
or 95 and up, you would talk to them first, and if they decline, then you would go further down the list until it exhausts. Is that how you guys?
Right, so reachable is the top three, so it doesn't matter the
it's
actual.
top three.
Yep, doesn't matter the actual score. If the top score was an 80, you have those three, and then as you eliminate one, so if we interviewed the top candidate with the highest score, that's our first, and if they say no, your top three goes down one notch. So the next eligible person, and it continues to trickle down.
Down
through
to the bottom. Gotcha.
To people that failed.
Gotcha.
Rick,
Yes.
we're talking about city residents that passed the test. Have city residents passed account 1 or account 3?
Not to our knowledge now. So I can
So
double.
nobody on that who's passed in account 1 or account 3 countywide is a city resident.
He said that they didn't want it. They declined the position. It's not that they
So-
didn't pass.
Well, that's what I'm trying to find out.
I would have to double check and look at the records, but
Because I
from
know,
what
I mean,
Brad's
the
saying-
top 3 is what you, but if the top 3, 2 of them, and once you break that top 3, you can go down the list,
not all the way. You have to, your top three keeps rotating down.
rotating down. But
Yep.
we have people who live outside the city and all that. You also eliminate them because you have a city residence, correct?
Right, so to Brad's point, if, say, 5 people on the test were residents, your top three, like, you're gonna run out of your top three very quickly, and if they're or if they're turning down the position, to Brad's point, that list is exhausted.
So, okay, let's try to ask this question again. So we've had city residents say no.
Correct.
And we've had people be denied because they're not qualified.
Correct. Yeah.
And what was, out of my curiosity, what was the reason for the denial? Excuse me.
I would have to ask Brad on his,
If they took the test, how are they not qualified? Because the qualification is through that process. It's through that application process to even take the test.
I mean, I can speak to that on multiple levels. So to take the test is a small piece of the puzzle, right? So I can speak to my office in particular, right? So a personnel analyst is technically like a second level HR professional. If you look at the test, it's a bachelor's in anything they want. It's 3 years of experience doing a job. So yes, they might qualify for the test, but is somebody that has 3 years of experience doing anything going to help me and my department, my needs?
Well,
So,
it's better than nobody.
yes, right. Right. Right,
Well,
but
I mean,
if
you're
you're
talk-
looking for a highly specialized role, and to meet those requirements, yes, we would love to have people come in and learn and take that on, but to have a specialized skill, if somebody's missing that skill, it's going to hurt you. It's a detriment to have somebody in that role versus somebody that can execute.
Rick, God bless you, but to Councilor Caldwell's point,
I don't know how we got out of this. hole.
I worked with legions of people over my 50 years with the city that started just with a job and worked their way up. You're telling me that there were city residents in account 1 and account 3 that said no to these jobs.
There were city residents that said no.
Passed the test.
There was no one who qualified for a civil service exam that we declined because of their lack of qualifications. So they're either the accountant 1 and accountant 2. There were no city residents who were interested in the position. The other positions, I don't know that any of them have had an exam. So director of accounting, assistant director of accounting. And so we're not talking about people who have technically qualified for a civil service exam, but don't technically qualify for the position. We're not even into that conversation. We're just looking at resumes.
Greg, for perspective, how much trouble are you having hiring?
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to add. We are right now 40 to 50 people short. And I'm not talking about experienced people. I'm talking about right out of school, can't find them, they just don't want anything to do with accounting. Just last week, I had a young man hired, 58,000, no experience, right out of school. He took a job with J.P. Morgan Chase for 75. I mean, I can't match that.
Right.
I mean, and it happens over and over again. So you know, to Frank and Brad's point, I'd be surprised if there were any candidates out there at this point, quite frankly. I mean, because we're doing whatever we can. Can't find anyone. I mean, I've never been in a position where I'm telling existing clients, I can't do your work anymore. I've been doing this for 25 years. I've never had that situation. So it's as bad as the Wall Street Journal says, for sure.
So, but you're Bondeo, but FUST, they have this specified talent that we're looking for to do the work? Like, how do they know PeopleSoft? How do they know what we're looking for?
So FUST is not doing PeopleSoft specifically. FUST is looking at Brad's accounting processes and operations. And PeopleSoft is particularly the core system, is a relatively generic accounting system. It's not anything particularly special. So if you know accounting systems in general, you're going to know PeopleSoft. They also have, FUST is a very large auditing firm like Bonadeo, so they know multiple packages they need to in order to be able to do their work. But specifically what they're looking at is our processes and the framework under which we're doing our accounting and looking for the potential for doing those things better by better utilizing a system. Is FUST having the same problems? Absolutely. Brad said, if we had the money, we'd love to hire 5 more people from FUST. FUST wouldn't have those 5 more people to give us. They're in this exactly the same position as any large regional accounting firm, which they are, a little bit smaller than Bonadeo, but they are a large regional accounting firm. They're having exactly the same recruiting problems.
Can we pay our people overtime, your current staff, to work extra hours to get the job done?
That's a Rick.
It's a Rick.
I mean, we can always pay overtime.
I mean, they have to be willing to do it, but.
They have to be willing to do it, which is an issue, and then budgetary constraints.
Okay.
Can I just say
Go on,
this?
Counselor.
Thank you, Counselor Hogan. Okay, so what I want to say is, I know, right? So I'm not trying to say that everyone's not doing their best, because I know you guys are. Across the board, across the country, people are looking for employees. But one thing I would like to say, and I really feel this down in the bottom of my heart, that sometimes we have to look out the box, right? And look at people and say, hey, this might not be what their resume say or what their tests say, but when you get them in a position, they're phenomenal, right? Sometimes people are horrible test takers, and some people's resume does not reflect how great they are, right? And the skills that they can. And I think we've all been in positions where we had to learn and go up this, somebody gave me a chance to say, hey, Rashida, let me see what you got. And then we learned from there. So I think part of what we need to do is start, pushing harder and looking at other options for, how we can get people in.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree more. I think civil service testing is wildly outdated.
Yeah.
And if I could nix it, I'd do it today. But I agree 100%. We need to get people in the door, but we need to also have a foundation to get people in the door, and that's where we're struggling, I feel. We don't have the foundation that we need to teach people. I'm sure Brad can speak to the same exact issue that I have. When you have zero HR experience in an HR department, you can't build a future department with, it's what's keeping us from being a transactional department to a customer service-based department. Same thing with Brad. If you're not able to lay that foundation of we have solid accountants, we have solid bookkeepers, all of that, you can't really teach anybody. Otherwise, Brad's going to be doing it himself. And that's kind of where we're looking to be, is how we want to lay the foundation so that we can bring people in that can grow and learn and understand. But I agree 100%.
I think it's generational in part. There's a 25-year-old today, and I'm going to make myself sound old here, not compared to Councilor Hogan, but
Nobody is.
I think the idea of a pension and health insurance doesn't mean what it used to mean to a 25-year-old.
Correct. It doesn't pay my mortgage.
$7,000 in annual salary means more to them than a secure future. Whereas my generation, and I think my parents before me, the word pension really meant something. Maybe we're not selling that in a way. I don't know how we do that. I don't have the answer to that, the magic bullet, but it does mean something when you get to be 45. Suddenly health insurance is a whole new ordeal, but
Right.
It's hard to look 20 years in the future.
It very well could be a nearsighted generational issue, and I don't disagree with that. But I also think that kind of what Frank was alluding to earlier is that it's up to me and my department to, how do we sell that, right? And it's not what it was 30 years ago, and it's not going to be the same in 5 years. So what do we do to make that lasting impact, and how do we change the perception of the city and our benefits?
And is the public aware, I guess? I question, if we don't know how many vacancies there are as a common council, does the public understand
No.
that we have all those jobs out there?
Maybe.
How do we do it? I don't have
But-
the answer to that either, but.
Exactly, and we don't have that as HR either, which is a huge detriment, that we don't have a system that we can pull up and see where all of our vacancies lie. So
Rick, do we have a recruiter in the city?
no.
We don't. So that's probably one of our problems. You
So-
know, 'cause part of why I'm saying that is we have an institution that train people to get into, and then we gotta be on their faces. We gotta be at the door to be able to be selling our
I agree 100%.
pension. You know,
And that's me coming in. I've restructured the department, and we just hired for a TA specialist, essentially. So a
What's
talent acquisition.
Okay.
So recruiting, retention, all of that. We're building that, right? But the city has historically not had it because, to Frank's point, we didn't need it. People showed up in droves, ready to be here, ready to work. It's not the situation anymore. So we're building that as part of, and to my point earlier, that's why we need that foundation. I need somebody that understands true strategic recruiting versus somebody that could sit at a computer and
and I think it will take time, going back to Brad's point earlier about institutional knowledge. You know, we bring these young, inexperienced people in. We need people to teach them. Otherwise, they feel left out, and it become a rotating cycle where people
Burns
feel
out.
like
Absolutely.
left out, not trained, unsupported, and they leave. You know, so it's double-edged sword in a sense.
Counselor, has been mentioned by Brad and Frank, institutional knowledge, there's a severe gap here in the city of institutional knowledge. As Counselor Monto just mentioned, other than Counselor Hogan, there are very precious few of us, I happen to be one of the relics, that has the institutional knowledge. Not for every specific job function, but there's still people in the community who retired from here, and we could potentially inquire if they would have an interest to come back to help out short term. One of the flaws that we have in our system is, because of civil service and in the charter, you can't have two people in the same position. So you can't have a person there training like they do in private business. So whenever old folk like me retire, then out the door goes that institutional knowledge. But I don't want this to be a personnel, I know that's part of it, but the issue here is we need to make a commitment and a priority about, like I've talked with Rick about in terms of when we did the audit on workers' comp. It has to be a cultural change. It has to be a priority. It has to come from the top. My understanding, and again, I'm not complaining, I'm not blaming. My understanding when I spoke with the mayor and Frank, this was a priority, that we would get this done. And I recognize the shortage of staff, but Brad came here and said, this is one of the things that's right in the ordinance as what the FUS was going to work on to get this completed. So we've got to make this a priority. It's a $350 million operation. The taxpayer deserves this as a priority to get somebody that's a retiree or hire out to get this work done. And I want to say, if it's being recorded, so Greg and Brad, well, Brad said the end of January. Greg is now saying the middle of February. I hope that that's going to be the case. But I'm here to tell you that probably we won't be that.
So just to be able to at least look for answers, Brad, have we looked at how Rochester, Buffalo, and other cities somewhat of our size are dealing with this? Because I'm sure they are probably struggling as we are. Have you looked to them to see what are they doing different to maybe help ourselves out?
Yeah, the one thing I've looked into is salaries. They just pay a lot more.
Oh, salary.
Can't we
So-
run a municipality that's equivalent?
Civil
What
service.
But to Brad,
we do to change?
with your interviews, I just wanted to know along with that is what are the main reasons for denials? of why people do not want to work? No salary.
Two reasons are residency and salaries.
Okay. It seems to be the problem across the board with everything.
I mean, we are significantly smaller than Rochester and Buffalo, so we have a smaller tax base. That's part of the comp issue. A second piece of the comp issue that we're trying to tackle is hemorrhaging money, right? So things like workers' comp that are wildly out of control, if we can control those numbers and build a robust safety culture program team, we can reduce workers' comp numbers, we can reduce accidents, injuries, all of that. That's money that can be allocated to salaries versus a few folks. So my team is actively looking at, without increasing our budget, what can we do to reallocate money appropriately? On top of everybody should go home in the same condition they came into work. That's priority number one, but priority number two is there's a lot of money that comes from that, and we've continually budgeted for increases, and we shouldn't be. We should be budgeting to fix the problem and reallocate that money, so.
I just, Councilor Hogan, and thank you for bringing this up. You know, it just sounds like we are a broken system that just keep getting broken, and there's not a lot of hope here. What, you know what I mean?
So,
This is just,
so it's a great point, Councilor Majoke. So let me respond to that at a more strategic level. So one of the reasons that the mayor asked me to join his team, I spent about 35 years, a little bit less than that, working on organizational change and change management systems, people. It basically comes down, it usually comes down mostly to people. Systems are important. People are even more important. If you look at an organizational or structural change that fails, it normally fails not because of the system, it fails because of the people. The city of Syracuse is at a critical inflection point. We are very fortunate in that we have, for the first time, the resources to address the structural and people changes that need to take place. For decades, that was not the case. So the system was allowed to limp along, and everybody just said, it's a municipality that's on the brink of bankruptcy. There's no investment that can be made that's going to fix it, so we're not going to fix it. And the reality is our circumstances have changed. We are in what I like to call the muck and mire of change right now. It is difficult, it is ambiguous, it is opaque, but to the auditor's point, we are committed to making those changes. We're making them in human resources, we're making them in finance, we're making them in IT, we're doing it all at once. We're building the plane as we fly it, largely, because we still have to operate while we're making all the changes in people and systems, and it feels awful right now, but I can assure you that we're on the right road, and there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and it is not an oncoming train.
You know, Frank, I'm glad you said that. I have confidence only because I have experienced the crisis that we went through.
Yeah.
Was
And I will publicly thank you and the council for your support during that awful
The
time.
finance committee met with the city administration once every 2 weeks. And a brave new world, we didn't know if we were going to get any sales tax revenue, state taxes, state tax revenue was flat. You know, we didn't know what we were going to do as far as laying off people and furloughing people and all. There was some tough decisions made. I think one of the key things is, you know, we accept the problems, but we have to make sure that we accept all the solutions too.
And I am absolutely appreciative of the opportunity to come in front of you and explain ourselves, because it isn't fixed yet. And it's not going to be fixed for a while. And I would be pretending if I told you when any one of those specifically is going to be fixed. When is Rick going to have human resources rebuilt? I've got my internal timetable. I've got the timetable where I kick his behind periodically and say, why the heck isn't this done yet? And then I've got the knowledge in my head that it's like turning a ship away from the iceberg. The odds are you're going to at least get nicked. So yes, we need to be accountable to you. You need to know what we're doing. We need to respond to the auditor and the auditor's questions. The auditor's asking 100% appropriate questions. Why didn't we get it done? I think Brad's given you the answer to that. Does that feel good? No, it feels awful. Do I wish that we had handed Greg the general ledger on the 31st of December and said, we're done, and we got it done 2 years in a row? I can't tell you how much I wanted to be able to stand up here and say that to you. We didn't pull it off. we screwed up. I hope, and we are certainly going to work, that that's not going to be a repeat. But it's not just in finance, it's across every administrative system, and I can't guarantee you that we're going to fix it in a year, can't guarantee you that we're going to fix it in 2 years. It is, without question, a priority.
Okay.
I'm willing to see what happens in February.
Well, look, you know, I want to keep this to an hour, so I think, unless.
I
there
just
are
want
any
to say that there's only 33 jobs posted on the HR website that goes to Indeed, and I can only find 2 that are finance-related unless there's a missing part here, but are they not all posted, 7 to 8?
Tend to drop off and renew periodically.
I mean, this is kind of a problem, and if you search the SearGov website, and you put jobs in, it doesn't come up. Job fair that happened last year, so,
And we're working with, so a lot of this is technology
again,
issues, and we're working with comms to build a robust A, intranet, and B, careers page, but feeding to Indeed and having to do each one manually is, I mean, not the solution. So not that it's an excuse, but it's not the solution, and we're trying to build an ATS that will mitigate those issues, because it's a whole cycle. Indeed is built for making money. So if on Indeed, if you do not continually refresh, even refreshing doesn't work anymore, you have to close a job, reopen it. So to have 100 jobs posted that you have to continually close, reopen under a different title to bring it to the first page. And I don't know if you've used Indeed in the last, they now have a wall that you can't go past the first page
why are we
without
using that
signing
again?
up. Because we don't have an ATS to push to or an intranet to have our own personal job page. But that's what we're trying to do, is fix that it needs to be accessible to
In
everybody.
the olden days, when we mailed a resume, right?
Right.
Counselor?
Didn't we just had a new website? Wasn't that factor into the new website front?
Yes and no, but it's still all done manually. So an ATS would push everything to that website, and we wouldn't have to continually update it each job. It would be done once. So-
Okay, it's 3 o'clock. I appreciate everybody's efforts involved in this. We'll see you back in mid-February with that financial report, and the audit, and everything else. I appreciate all the counselors and the city clerk and everybody else that came here, and I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Okay, thank you. Okay.